In a chilling event that left Kenya in shock, the nation lost two prominent leaders, Professor George Saitoti, then Minister of Internal Security, and his deputy Orwa Ojode, in a tragic helicopter crash on June 10, 2012. What seemed like a simple aviation accident quickly spiraled into one of Kenya's most controversial and puzzling tragedies. The sudden and unexplained deaths of Saitoti and Ojode, both influential figures in the fight against terrorism and corruption, have since sparked widespread speculation, rumors of foul play, and a myriad of unanswered questions. Was it merely a mechanical failure or a well-calculated political assassination? This mysterious event continues to cast a shadow over Kenya's political arena, leaving citizens wondering what really happened on that fateful day. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the story of the mysterious deaths of George Saitoti and Orwa Ojode, a tragedy that shook Kenya's political landscape. Welcome. George Saitoti was born on August 3, 1945 in Kajiado County, Kenya. He came from the Maasai community, known for its rich culture and history. Saitoti's educational journey began in local primary schools before he progressed to St. Mary's School in Nairobi. He later moved to the United States to pursue higher education, earning a degree in economics from the University of Massachusetts and a PhD from the University of Illinois. Saitoti's academic background laid the foundation for his future roles in government and politics. Orwa Ojode, on the other hand, was born in 1968 in Homa Bay County, Kenya. He was the son of a local chief and grew up in a politically active environment. Ojode attended primary school in his hometown before moving to Nairobi for secondary education. He later enrolled at the University of Nairobi, where he studied sociology. Ojode's charisma and leadership qualities quickly distinguished him, leading to his election as a student leader. George Saitoti entered politics in the late 1970s, joining President Daniel Arap Moi's government. He held various ministerial positions, including Minister of Finance and Minister of Education. Saitoti was known for his expertise in economic matters, and he played a crucial role in shaping Kenya's economic policies. In 1999, he was appointed Minister of Internal Security, where he focused on issues of law and order in the country. Orwa Ojode, on the other hand, began his political career in the late 1990s when he was elected as the Member of Parliament for Ndhiwa in 1997. He quickly established himself as a prominent voice in Parliament, advocating for the interests of his constituents and working to improve the lives of the ordinary Kenyans. Ojode was known for his approachable demeanor and dedication to public service, earning respect from both his colleagues and constituents. As members of President Mwai Kibaki's government, Saitoti and Ojode formed a strong political alliance. They were both members of the Kenya African National Union Party, also known as KANU, which had dominated Kenyan politics for decades. Saitoti, as a senior politician, provided guidance to Ojode, who was still establishing his political career. Their alliance was characterized by mutual respect and collaboration on various initiatives aimed at improving security, education, and health services in Kenya. They often traveled together to different parts of the country to assess local needs and implement development projects. This partnership became instrumental in addressing the challenges facing their constituencies and the nation as a whole. During Saitoti's tenure as Minister of Internal Security, he faced numerous challenges related to crime and terrorism. Kenya had been grappling with security issues, including the 1998 US Embassy bombing in Nairobi, which heightened concerns about terrorism. Saitoti took a proactive approach to address these issues, implementing various security reforms and policies. He worked closely with law enforcement agencies to enhance their capability and improve community policing. Saitoti believed that a strong and responsive security apparatus was essential for national stability and development. His commitment to security was evident in his efforts to engage local communities in crime prevention initiatives. On June 10, 2012, George Saitoti and Orwa Ojode were scheduled to attend a police function in the coastal city of Mombasa. They boarded a police helicopter, a Seco Sky S-76, along with two other passengers, pilot Captain Bwire and a police officer, Inspector Abdallah. The helicopter took off from Wilson Airport in Nairobi, and everything appeared to be normal initially. As they flew towards Mombasa, the helicopter experienced technical difficulties. Eyewitnesses reported seeing the aircraft struggling to maintain altitude. Shortly after takeoff, the helicopter went down in a forested area near the suburb of Ngong, about 20 kilometers from Nairobi. The crash was devastating. Emergency services rushed to the scene, but it was clear that the impact was severe. All 4 occupants of the helicopter lost their lives in the tragic accident. News of the crash sent shockwaves throughout Kenya, leading to an outpouring of grief from citizens, politicians, and leaders across the nation. This is where it gets interesting. Before we continue, make sure you subscribe to this channel for more videos like this. Ladies and gentlemen, let's go step by step. Chris Brias and Tim Carter, 2 Eurocopter specialists who had been flown in by Saitoti's family to represent them in the investigations, they had to return to South Africa because of multiple frustrations. The demand by the bereaved families that the wreckage be stored in a 4-foot container until they could be stripped had also not been acted on by the government, which had failed to avail 70,000 shillings for the purchase of the container. In fact, Mr. Fred Ngatia, the lawyer representing Saitoti's family in the investigations, had to intervene to prevent the engine from being transported to France for stripping, while Ngatia also complained of a lack of contact between the government and Saitoti's family. More seriously, accusations had also been made by MPs that foreign experts from France who had arrived in the country to help with the investigations had been so frustrated by the government that they had to return to their bases abroad. Was there any real or circumstantial evidence that could point to a political assassination, especially of Professor George Saitoti, a former presidential candidate in the upcoming elections? Just before the accident occurred at Ngong Forest, there was evidence that Saitoti's bodyguard, who was on board, had called the internal security minister's driver to inform him that he ought not to drive away from Wilson Airport, from where the helicopter had taken off, because the ill-fated helicopter was on its way back to Wilson Airport. What this meant was that the occupants of the helicopter had known in advance that the helicopter was experiencing mechanical problems, and this knowledge could have prompted the bodyguard to make that lone last-minute call for the driver to wait for Professor Saitoti, probably after concluding that a trip was off. Assuming that this was the case, what the investigators may have had to establish was what had caused the mechanical problem that led the pilots to decide to return to Nairobi less than 10 minutes after takeoff. The situation was even more intriguing because, according to available information, the lady pilot, Kitwanja, had test-flown the helicopter to Voi and back on Friday 7th of June 2012 and concluded that the chopper was in good flying condition. Mechanical problems were ruled out. If the helicopter had been fit to fly only 72 hours before the ill-fated chopper crashed, what might have happened at the parking bay after the lady pilot had landed it and retired for the day? It was reported that 2 to 3 minutes into the flight following takeoff at Wilson, the helicopter began to wobble. This meant that if there was any mechanical problem, it may have existed before takeoff, because why would a helicopter wobble immediately after takeoff? The helicopter did become airborne, but 4 minutes later, the pilots decided to return to the base. They never made it because the chopper crashed 2 minutes after the decision to return to the base had been taken. Under the circumstances, the question the investigators would have to answer was what might have caused the wobbling during takeoff, because it was this problem that may have worsened in the subsequent minutes, causing the pilot to abandon the trip before the chopper crashed. To be specific, the flight left Wilson Airport in Nairobi at 8:32 a.m. in good weather with some fog and visibility of 8 kilometers, Kenya Transport Minister Amos Kimunya told ministers during a live broadcast on KTN television station. The pilots lost contact with the control tower at about 8:38 a.m. and 4 minutes later, the aircraft fell to the ground. That is what Amos Kimunya said on KTN. Now, from this report, it meant that the chopper began to crash 6 minutes after takeoff. In summary, the chopper did take off and 2 to 3 minutes later, it began to wobble. In the next 3 minutes, 4 key events happened. A decision was taken by the pilots to return back. Saitoti's bodyguard called the minister's driver to say that they were returning back. The pilots lost contact with the control tower and the chopper crashed. The question that would have to be answered by the investigators was the kind of mechanical problem that could cause a chopper of that model to crash 6 minutes after takeoff. The theory of a mechanical failure had, however, been dismissed by the chopper's manufacturers, who stated that the chopper had the ability to glide and land in case of engine failure. To demonstrate their point, the experts had flown a similar helicopter to 3,500 feet, switched off the engine, and successfully landed it to show the Kenyan authorities that engine failure could not have led the chopper to crash and disintegrate on impact. An interesting piece of information which would have which would also have to be investigated was the news that the last person to have used the helicopter had been Police Commissioner Matthew Itere. According to these reports, the chopper had landed at Wilson Airport on Saturday, the 9th of June at 6 p.m. with Itere on board all the way from Mombasa. The Mombasa-Nairobi trip constituted a very long distance, and after landing at Wilson Airport, no mechanical problem had been reported on the chopper. That was a day after the chopper had been flown to Voi by Gitwanja, the lady pilot I told you, whose opinion after the test was that the chopper was fit to fly. Could someone have tampered with some gadget during the 14 hours that the chopper was parked at Wilson Airport as part of an assassination plot, knowing that Professor Saitoti would be on board the following day? The majority opinion suggested that Saitoti had been assassinated. Was it possible that a chopper that had been test-flown all the way to Voi and back on a Friday, and which had successfully flown to and from Mombasa on a Saturday, could suddenly crash with a span of 6 minutes after takeoff on a Sunday morning? These were key questions the investigators would have to answer. Assuming that the report that Itere had been the last person to have used the helicopter was credible, the implication was that from Itere's landing up on Saturday 8:32 a.m., a total of 14 hours had elapsed. If the helicopter had been in good flying condition just 14 hours before the fateful flight, what could have caused the serious problem that may have brought down the chopper? According to an eyewitness, there had been smoke coming from chopper moments before it crashed. Some conspiracy theorists had argued that there might have been an explosion on board, which might have created the smoke. The fact that both Saitoti and Ojode's bodies had their legs chopped off had been used to strengthen this theory by positing that a time bomb may have been planted at a location below the area where the two security ministers were seated. The view was that it was the explosion that had ripped off the legs of the two ministers. Although this theory could have been credible, it lost a lot of weight with the established fact that At the time of the crash, the helicopter was already returning to the base following the detection of a mechanical problem by the pilots. What investigators would have to find out was what could cause the smoke to billow from the engine of a helicopter soon after takeoff. According to some experts, this type of problem could have been due to fuel overflow or disconnected wires. If two critical wires had been disconnected, there could have been an electrical or engine malfunction, which could ignite a fire in the engine, causing smoke to billow out of the chopper in the mid-air. It was understood that a sudden billowing of smoke from the engine could also be triggered by a mechanical failure or a fuel leak occasioned by a ruptured fuel pipe. Whatever the case, these were leads the investigators would have to pursue. If there had been a fuel leak, was it caused by a natural circumstance or a human element? Obviously, there were many issues that would have to be investigated. In the meantime, conspiracy theories linked to the assassination of Professor Saitoti continued to fly. Any perceived frustration of investigations into the crash by the government will continue to be used by conspiracy theorists to suggest that the government had something to hide. As of now, the majority of opinions expressed in various media outlets tended to suggest that Saitoti was a victim of political assassination, either by drug barons or members of the Mount Kenya cartel, or both. The task of the investigators would be to prove that this was not the case.